And my name is Joanne Scaturo. I'm on the board of the Foster Family Alliance. I'm a retired social worker and doing more all the things I love. So this is one of the things I love. And I co-chair the training committee with my friend Joe Allen, who is marvelous. And we're very happy to have, is it okay to call you Trip?
Yes, please.
I mean, that's how I know you, Trip. So
Yeah.
We're very happy to have Trip Ake with us tonight, who's one of our, I think one of our North Carolina heroes in the area of trauma-informed care and working for families. So I'd love for him to just a few announcements. If you would, please put down on your calendars the date, May 22nd, save the date for our Foster Family Summit that we're going to be having on May 22nd. It's a Saturday from 10 to 2:30, and actually Trip will be presenting there as well. So we're really excited about his involvement with us and how we're getting good information out to all of you. So Trip, do you want to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, happy to. Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was just coming in right before the meeting started. I am a North Carolina native. I'm a psychologist, and I work for the Center for Child and Family Health in Durham, North Carolina, and for Duke Medical Center. And I am also an adoptive parent, which I think makes this topic for this evening especially important to me, and I'm glad to see so many here this evening. And just thankful, Joanne, for you and the board and others that have invited me to come and just share a little bit tonight about this resource parent curriculum. So should I start into the topic, or do you want to make sure you have the other things you want to make sure to cover first?
The only thing that we want to say is if everybody would put themselves on mute, that would be very helpful. And not that we want to mute you, but we don't want to hear dogs barking and planes going overhead and whatever else is happening. But we also, if you have any questions for Trip at the end, we always try to answer your questions. Just put your questions in chat and I'll be tracking those, and then we will have a few minutes to do that with Trip.
Wonderful.
So go ahead, it's yours.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much again for the opportunity to be here. I was asked to come and talk a little bit about this this curriculum that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network created about 10 years ago. And a little bit about the network, just so you know a little bit more about it. So the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is part of the federal HHS system, funded many years ago, right after actually 9/11, this network of experts on child trauma to help us learn more about what is child trauma, but also to provide the best treatment and information to service systems like child welfare and juvenile justice and courts and those groups. And the network has grown over that time to now over 100 funded centers across the country, including 3 in Durham, 1 in Charlotte, and 1 in Greensboro. So we have several in North Carolina, and then about 150 or more affiliate members, which are previously funded network sites that are continuing to be very active. And a group of that network, probably about 30 people in a child welfare kind of subcommittee, spent about 3 years creating this curriculum. And the reason it took so long is because they couldn't agree on what needed to be shared with resource parents about what child trauma was and how it's relevant. And I think because they took so long, they created a really great product that we're seeing make a lot of difference in the lives of children and families across the country. And the Center for Child and Family Health that I work with has been providing this and training facilitators in this for about 9 years or so now, and have a lot of experience with it. So the long title is up in the top corner: Caring for Children Who've Experienced Trauma, a workshop for resource parents. And the shorthand version is the resource parent curriculum. And of course, everything needs an acronym. And so we call it RPC for short. So if you hear any of those different terms, they're meaning to talk about the same curriculum, but they may do it slightly differently. So a little bit about the curriculum. It's a trauma-informed in-service training. So it's really designed for foster, adoptive, kinship, therapeutic foster parents, that's where the term resource parent kind of really is centered around, who are already licensed, who already have kids in their home, or who have in the past. This is not to replace MAP. This is not a pre-service. This is really for those parents who are already involved in the work of parenting. And I kind of talk a little bit about, for our oldest child, when my wife was pregnant with our oldest child, I told all of my friends, I said, any class they have at the hospital, we're going, right? And we went to every one that they offered. And our friends who were parents said, that's great. You go to those classes. There's going to be some lessons that you'll probably learn when you come home. And boy, were they right? There's the stuff that you can learn before a kid comes into your home, and then there's the lessons that you learn once they're in their home. And I think RPC is really geared towards that side of the equation of once kids have been placed with you, or once kids have been adopted, or once kids are in the care of those resource parents. And so it's an in-service designed by the network to assist resource parents in recognizing the impact of trauma on children who are in the child welfare system. RPC is included, if you know about the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse, that's kind of like the place to go if you have an acronym and you're not sure what it is, right? Is like, is this a good treatment? Is this a good practice? And so RPC is included in that review, and has been rated highly relevant to the needs of children and families. It is not an evidence-based treatment, so it doesn't have randomized controlled trials and all those types of things, but it is something that is gaining evidence for use in this workshop format for resource parents to really benefit. And our hope is that in the end, we'll see a reduction in the number of placement disruptions in our state and in our country. That's really what we're going for, because you guys know better than anybody that the outcomes that we have for kids who have multiple placement disruptions are really, really poor. So we know that they have I'm seeing some heads nod. They have harder time socially, lots of different types of issues that they need additional support for, and so we're really hoping that that's an outcome that we'll see. The other thing to note is that the North Carolina Child and Family Service Plan and the diligent recruitment and retention efforts include RPC as part of their strategy. So just so you know, this is something that those groups, those documents that have been created, name RPC as something that they really want to be available to all foster, adoptive, kinship parents, and that they're really targeting 2023 as a time that it would be available statewide, which is a pretty lofty goal. 2023 might seem like a long time away, but it really isn't, especially the way time has been going for me during COVID. I don't know about for you. So that's really encouraging. And the curriculum, what does it look like? I'm in a room apparently with a motion light. Wouldn't you know it? Hopefully that won't happen a lot of times while we're meeting, but it could. Um, so um, the curriculum is designed, again, for foster or adoptive kinship, therapeutic foster parents. The workshops are in 8 2-hour sessions that are usually consecutive. So you would have 8 weeks, 16 hours total that a group of resource parents would gather. Every session features activities where caregivers can apply the concepts to a child currently placed in their home. So at the end of every night, what happens is that resource parents take these things called My Child worksheets, and then they map the content of the curriculum onto their child, not to turn in, not as an assignment, but more of a self-reflection and for caregivers to work with each other to think about, like, how does this apply to our situation? What are the things that we need to be thinking about, and what does it look like? The other really unique thing about RPC is that it's led by 2 different types of facilitators with child welfare knowledge. First, there's a staff facilitator. So those are folks like child welfare professionals, mental health professionals, typically folks who are familiar with what it might be like for resource parents to be parenting, the kinds of situations that their children might have experienced coming into their care. So they're really very knowledgeable about those things. But the really cool thing is that these groups are also co-facilitated by a parent facilitator. And so these are foster parents, adoptive parents, former foster youth who are adults now, who can really provide that voice of lived experience so that we can really understand from a different perspective about what the content of the curriculum is trying to say. And I have to say, I have learned so much by having co-facilitators to work with. There have been times where I've been in the front of the room and I have said something and people didn't understand it. And then my parent facilitator or foster care alumni facilitator say something very similar, and people are like, that is amazing. That's exactly what I needed to hear. And so I really feel like their perspective is so important to include. And I'm glad that that's part of the equation of what is kind of required or expected as part of RPC. This is an older map, but it kind of represents the counties where we have staff facilitators. We're currently training a cohort right now that are, so this map would look a little bit more filled in. But the good news is that we are having them offer virtual groups. It's not so dependent on where people can drive. I know that depending on it, they work for a child welfare agency that says parents have to be in our county to be able to be served. That may still be a limitation, but we are hoping that if any of you decide, we're going to have an opportunity tonight. If any of you decide that you'd like to be involved in a group, we have some of those going on, and hopefully could connect you to a facilitator. In fact, we just finished tomorrow. We'll finish with our staff facilitation training for this year, and then those folks have to do a group by the end of June. And so it may even be that we have a group that some of you would be interested in participating before then. So here are the 8 weeks right in front of you. So here are the topics. Trauma 101 is a way of just kind of starting the conversation about what in the heck is trauma, how does it impact kids? This is a buzzword that's used a lot. So like, what's the difference between trauma? What's the difference between that and stress? How do we talk about it? Then we'd go a little bit further into understanding the effects of trauma, knowing about long-term effects, but also some about like the short-term effects that we see, and when kids are removed from danger, how they continue to develop and grow, and how they are very resilient, and how we can plug them into the right kind of resources. Building a safe place is about like in our typical resource parent's home. What are the strategies? What are the ways that we can build safety, knowing that safety is not just about physical safety? So you guys could probably tell me, I'm sorry, y'all, tell me better than I can tell you. and maybe you can put this in the chat, do you think that, we'll do a scaling question, 10 being kids totally believe what you say in regard to what I'm getting ready to put out there, and 0 being they don't believe it at all. When you tell them that you are a safe parent, and they first come into your home, 10 being like it really means a lot to them, they totally understand, they totally believe, 0 being it doesn't mean a lot, that you have that to say, that they need more time. 3, 0, 2 to 3, 1. Good. Yep. So these numbers show me that you guys know better than I do about less than 5, that just because we say that we're a safe parent and that kids are in a safe home does not mean that kids believe that they are safe. And so we talk a lot about the differences between psychological safety, meaning how kids feel that they're safe, and physical safety, right? As an adoptive parent, I have a ton of ways of demonstrating that I'm a safe parent. I have fingerprints, I had a home study, I had a background check, I had all these things that are like on paper show that I can be a safe parent, but it doesn't really mean that much to a child coming into my home for me to show them that paperwork, right? That it's not necessarily going to mean that much. The next module that we deal with is feelings and behaviors. And it's kind of interesting because this is usually what resource parents want to spend the most time talking about, right? This is like, let's talk about the behaviors that I'm seeing. But what happens is we put it in the middle of the curriculum because in order to understand the feelings and behaviors, we have to understand the context of the trauma that kids have experienced. So we problem solved there and talked a little bit about the kinds of ways that kids show their feelings and emotions. And a lot of times young kids, they don't have the words to talk about how they're feeling. And so they show you through their behavior. And that's one of the things that you guys probably know better than anybody. Connections and healing, we talk about how kids are connected to various people and situations, but that often they experience loss as a result of their experience. And that even though they may have people in their life that we're not the safest, that doesn't mean that kids don't still want to be connected to them. And what does that mean? And how do we honor that? And what are ways that we still keep kids safe? Becoming an advocate, a lot of times we talk about how resource parents are some of the strongest trauma-informed parts of a team, that they know more about what's happening in a child's life related to how trauma is playing out or the things that they're scared of or how they respond. And so this talks about like how to advocate for trauma-informed therapy or things that happen in the schools or with physicians so that folks can practice that. And then certainly not least, but in this curriculum, it comes last, how to take care of yourself, knowing that this is hard work. And that we know that resource parents are at risk for burning out sometimes with the kinds of things that they're faced with. And certainly this last year, my guess is there are things that changed in your life this last year that you did not expect as a resource parent to be dealing with that you now are. And so we want to make sure that we're taking care of you. The reason we believe RPC is important is because trauma is really difficult to understand. Yes, Susan and Daryl, yeah, burnout is something that is very real, and and there's a whole science on it. There's a whole science on secondary traumatic stress. You guys could look it up about when we hear really difficult to hear stories about what kids go through, that sometimes, depending on how frequent that happens in our life and what kind of supports we have in place and how much training we have, that we can sometimes take on some of the same symptoms that kids who've experienced those things directly might have. RPC is important, and thanks for using the chat, by the way. Like, feel free to drop things in or questions even before we get to the end if you want, so that we can have a conversation. It's important because trauma is difficult to understand. It's different for every kid. So while one kid may have experienced one event and seem to be coping relatively well, we may have another kid that had the same exact event happen at the same age that struggles in a really different way. It provides a place for resource parents to talk about complex issues and then really concentrate on real life applications so that we're not just talking at you in a training, right? We're really thinking about what does this mean? How does this play out? So Karen said we had a foster child for 7 weeks. Today was her first chance for a visit. She became hysterical, showed anxiety. Is that a sign? Is that my sign something may have occurred at home that hasn't come out before? It's very possible, Karen. I don't know all the details of your situation, but I will say that 7 weeks, in my view, is just past the point that I don't know if it's called a honeymoon period or those types of things, but it's just at the point where kids probably start feeling safer. And then sometimes you see some of the behaviors that maybe because they're feeling safe, um, show you just how unsafe they might feel, right? Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening there, but I do think that sometimes the behavior that we see has nothing to do with us, and a lot to do with what happened prior to coming into our care, and sometimes about triggers that we don't even realize are being triggered, right? That are things that we didn't realize that this particular situation, person, place, those kind of things could make a child feel anxious in some way. Right. Yeah, sometimes feeling safe is a new experience, Joanne, you're right. And then the other reason that RPC is important is we've seen shifts in parents' perspectives about maybe I can handle a behavior that I didn't think I could before. Maybe it's not Johnny trying to make my life miserable. Maybe it's something about something that happened in Johnny's past that's really hard. And those to us are great changes that take place because then we see that maybe parents are able to use the resources that are around them a little differently and be able to continue providing a stable placement a little bit longer. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a taste of the introduction of this. I thought it might be interesting to kind of see what some of the content looks like. And so this is some of the information that comes up on the first night. So the basics about who the facilitators and schedule are, then some getting to know you activities, which we won't necessarily do, and then some about just the basics of why a trauma workshop. That many kids in foster care have lived through difficult experiences. That's one of the reasons maybe that brought them to foster care. That they bring their traumas with them into our homes, meaning that the experience that they have that we really can't relate to or we don't know are things that they bring that into to your home in a way that it's just hard to predict or understand exactly what it was like, and that it's our job to not replicate in any kind of way the situations that they've had before where they felt unsafe, and that we know that trauma affects behavior, feelings, relationships, and sometimes the view of the world in profound ways. Have you guys ever met, maybe you could do yes, no, have you ever met kids that were pretty sure that all adults would hurt kids? Yeah. And and for some of you who haven't, good for you. I'm glad that you haven't. But I'm seeing a lot of yeses. And what's hard about that is I think most of you are really safe parents, right? And so for kids to come into our care with the potential belief that adults hurt kids can be really hard, right? Because so then we get into this potential like explaining mode of like I'm different and here's how it's going to be different from your experience. But again, like we said before, just because we say that we're safe doesn't mean that kids always understand or believe that right away because their experiences told them that maybe adults aren't safe. And so that's where the work of trauma-informed resource parents really come to play. Um, so we also know that the trauma affects us. So this is just what we were talking about earlier, as we had some of you saying that maybe burnout is something that's hard. So building trust is hard work that takes a long time for many. Sharon is right. Yeah. So it's not something that that is overnight. Sometimes it takes some time. And Corey is saying safe is defined differently sometimes. Yes. Like what might be safe for us might not be safe for a kid. And just think about it. Like think about other adults that you've met that have hangups about certain things where they're just like, not going to drive on that part of the highway, right? Like that is not. I don't do highways, and you're like, it's fine. I think we can drive there. But they have something about that experience for them that's not okay. We have some similar things with kids, but the difference is they don't know how to articulate it. So then we have to like guess, or we have to kind of start looking at patterns of behavior. So thinking back to Karen earlier, as you were talking about what's been happening over the last week or two, that's something that like that now you have to be the trauma trigger detective to like figure out like is it what is about this situation or about the people or about like what's making this scary when we're not feeling scared. What's that about? And that we know that trauma's effects on children and us can disrupt a placement, and that's just something that we're trying to kind of reduce. So this is a quote. Typically in RPC we would tell or ask a parent to read a quote, but I'll read it for you. No one really explained to me about the impact of trauma on a child's life. I wished I'd known more about trauma sooner. And this is a foster dad. And I agree, because I think a lot of times it can really clarify for parents what a behavior has been like or what it's about. We already talked earlier about the different modules, but this is something we would introduce to a group of parents about the modules that we'll go through. So I'll skip over that. There's some ground rules to try to make it safe. You've seen these before in MAP or other classes that you've been a part of. And sometimes we would generate maybe a list of other ground rules that the group wants to keep into play, knowing that, I don't know about you guys, but like parenting is very personal, right? And not many people want to sign up to say, tell me how to parent better. I mean, I think you guys are invested. You're here. You want to learn more about this curriculum, but it's a sensitive thing, right? Depending on how people talk about it or how open they are to different approaches or those kind of things. It can be really sensitive where people, sometimes we've had people probably offer us um, advice when we didn't ask for it. Have you guys ever had that happen before? Where you're like, you don't even know this person, and somehow they're giving you advice about how to parent, and they don't know the context, they don't know about this child's history, those kind of things. It's a sensitive thing. And Susan and Daryl, I'm glad that you're saying sign me up now. That's awesome. So we also kind of understand that it's okay for parents to disagree, because again, there's no one size fits all for parenting, but certainly there are some general principles that we really want to highlight and bring up. And if a topic or activity makes people feel uncomfortable, we want to make sure folks know that we're not going to talk about trauma without being sensitive to the fact that this might be hard for parents, right? So if we don't say, you can take care of yourself and like check out for a little while, but make sure to check back in before the end of the group, then I think we would be, like not practicing what we preach, right? And so I think we want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to opt out or to be aware of where their emotional thermometer is, which is the next topic. We tell parents that throughout the group, we want for them to think about where they are on this feelings thermometer, right? So if they're totally bored, they might want to do something to heat up a little before they come into group, right? Like, or figure out like how to stay engaged if they're feeling super sleepy, like they're just not with it. If they're very hot, then maybe we need to find a way to kind of catch it before it gets to that point, to take a break and disconnect. And I think the other thing I'll just say about this curriculum is that sometimes it can pull for emotion. And I think that's part of the reason we want to make sure that we're serving what we call in the curriculum emotional containers for kids, so that we can contain their emotion without like adding to it. We want to be emotional containers for parents too, and make sure that we can be mindful of that. So we would go through some introductions. This is the first quote in the first module. There was a child went forth every day, and all he looked upon became part of him. And then we introduce you to these kids that are not, they are not identifiable kids, but they're kind of a compilation of a lot of different kids across the network that were kind of mushed into these examples. So this is not like there's not a Maya out there that this maps onto exactly, but definitely these are a compilation of real examples that people have made into one single kid. So we have different aged kids that we focus on throughout the curriculum, knowing that maybe you guys have different age kids that you're caring for too, and have to think about developmentally, how does this information connect to what I know, right? So Maya wakes up during the middle of the night crying, where their Aunt Jenna tries to soothe her. Maya arches her back, pushes her hands against Jenna's shoulders, and screams harder. When she tries to make eye contact with Maya, the baby turns her head away. And the parent, Jenna, says, this little baby makes me feel completely rejected. Sometimes I feel helpless. I just have to put her down and let her cry. Rachel is 17 months old. Since being placed in foster care, she's shown little interest in food and has lost a pound. She used to say mama, dada, baba, hi, and bye-bye, but has stopped talking. So some of the things that we know about regression in kids after really scary things happen. Rachel often stands by the door or window silently looking around as if waiting for someone, right? And then we meet Tommy, who repeatedly plays with a toy police car and ambulance, crashing them into each other while making the sound of sirens wailing. And when his foster father tries to change his play, Tommy screams and throws the police car and ambulance. And Andrea is 9. She was reading with her foster father one day, and when she was sitting on his lap, she began to rub herself up and down against his crotch. Shocked and startled, the foster father pushes her away and tells her to get out of here. She runs to her room sobbing, "Why does everyone hate me?" and starts packing her suitcase. James is 12, is withdrawn and unresponsive. When asked what he wants, he says whatever and shrugs his shoulders. He's been failing at school. When he moved in, foster parents asked if he wanted to put up some pictures of his grandparents. I think he had passed away, and he says, "No, I don't, leave me alone," snaps and retreats to his bedroom. Javier is 15. He got in trouble for being the class clown. He's skipping classes to drink or smoke pot. At a party, he saw a friend verbally abusing a girl, and when the friend pushed the girl, Javier beat him up. And when the caseworker asked what had happened, he said, "I don't know, I just went into kill mode." And what we know about Javier is in his past, he was often in the position of protecting his mom in domestic violence. So at this point, we would ask for caregivers. Do these kids and the kinds of things they're presenting with sound familiar? And I guess I'm just curious, does this sound familiar to you? Is this any of these kids, either the way that they present their behavior or the way that they're showing up? So this is hopefully something that would be relatable to your experience and could be something that maybe you could surround yourself with other parents that are experiencing similar things to kind of think through. Though we don't all have the exact answers, how can we look through a trauma lens to really think about what what kids might have been through? And here's the challenge: caring for children who've been through trauma can leave us feeling these kinds of things, right? Frustrated, unappreciated, angry, helpless, confused. And the solution is trauma-informed parenting. So when you understand what it is and how it's affected kids, it's easier to communicate with kids, to improve behavior, to get your child the help that they need, reduce the risk of your own compassion fatigue, and become more effective. So here are the essential elements that are embedded in the curriculum. So they're not module by module, but they are kind of embedded throughout. So one is to recognize the impact that trauma's had on your child, right? Just to look through that lens and say, okay, Here's my child. What do I know about their background? What do I know about their history? What do I know about what makes them feel scared based on something that happened before coming into my home? The second element is trying to help kids feel safe. And this is hard. Remember how I said, like, just saying it out loud isn't enough? Sometimes it's hard to know what is enough. Like, what does help kids to feel safe if just telling them and showing them by not being harmful isn't enough, and it's pretty individualized. And sometimes we have to ask our kids, what would help you feel safer? What's something I could do that would help you feel safer? Either in general, or maybe there's a specific situation around, like right now, what would help you feel safer? Because it seems like maybe you're not feeling safe. Another essential element is helping kids to understand and manage overwhelming emotions. So how do we talk with kids about feelings, and how do we make sure that they label them correctly, and how do we model for them talking about feelings? I noticed that too, like some parents are like really interested in making sure to help kids with their feeling words and kind of managing their emotions. But have you met parents that want their kids to do that, but they're not good with their feelings? And I have. I'm some days I'm that parent, I think, probably. But I think that that's something we want to help kids with. Helping kids to understand and modify behaviors. Yes, you, Corey. Okay, thank you for making me feel better. Um, uh, so how do we deal with behaviors and shift them a little bit? We talked some about examples of kids who hoard food, or kids who um, wet the bed, or kids who um, are aggressive, or those kind of things. And this is not a replacement for therapy, right? This is not meant to be a therapy group. But what it is a support system with other resource parents to be able to do that. And it looks like we're seeing some in the chat about the evaluation, having trouble getting it to work, but I'll just say that out loud, knowing we're not to the end quite yet. Another essential element is respecting and supporting positive, stable, and enduring relationships. So knowing that while kids might have had a really bad experience with a set of caregivers, that they still may feel connected to them. And what do we do with that? And how do we talk about it? Developing a strength-based understanding of their story, so that we can repack their, we call it an invisible suitcase, the suitcase they bring in with them as they come in, filled with all the thoughts about themselves, caregivers, and the world. And we want them to be able to repack that suitcase and not have so many negative things in it. Being an advocate for your child, this is huge. Like having kids have someone who understands that. I'll give you an example. So there was a kid in a North Carolina school, I won't tell you what county, who was being triggered by a music teacher using a coach's whistle to transition between instruments, right? So like this is when it was time for all the instruments to be quiet, this teacher would blow a whistle really loud, and this kid was really triggered by it. And so the parents did a great thing. They went to the school and they said, hey, I'm not really sure if you mean to do this, but when you blow this whistle, it's really scary for Johnny. Now, the teacher's response initially wasn't so great. They said, I've been doing this for 25 years. Johnny's a little overreactive. He'll be okay, right? Which didn't sit well with the foster parents, right? But just so you know, like that's the beginning of a conversation to say, okay, well, let me tell you why. Like you've been doing this for 25 years and it's not a big deal. And I know it doesn't seem like a coach's whistle. Why would that be scary? But for Johnny, here was, I'm not going to give you all the details of Johnny's experience, but let me just tell you that loud noises were connected to really scary things. And you're not a scary person, but the noise makes him think about that, right? So that would be a way that a parent could talk about it. Promoting and supporting trauma-focused assessment and treatment. So asking therapists questions like, how did you decide that's the treatment you're going to use? What assessment are you using? How do we know that when treatment's over? Like, what does Johnny do, or what do we do to say things have improved enough for him to be done? These are questions that we empower parents to be able to ask, because therapists should be able to answer those kind of questions, right? Some therapists don't love that I advertise this as a therapist, right? But these are important questions for them to be able to answer. And another essential element of trauma-informed parenting is taking care of yourself, knowing, even in really small ways, the best way to be able to take care of yourself, or having people that know you well enough that say, hey, I'm kind of noticing that maybe you need a break, or can I take some responsibility off your hand just for tonight, or can I, and I know that it's so much harder probably during COVID to do that because you had other people that you could connect with. So I know that you're probably already becoming much more creative in thinking about what that looks like. So here's some myths that I just want to throw out, and then maybe I'll pause because we're not actually doing an RPC group, but I just wanted to give you a taste of what it kind of looks like. So these are some myths, though, that we want to make sure to address. My love should be enough to erase the effects of everything bad that happened before. I just want to let you know, like, it's not a bad thing for you to share your love with kids, but you sharing that love isn't necessarily something that will fully erase the things that happened before. It's not about you, right? It's really about what kids have experienced. My child should be grateful and love me as much as I love him or her. Do you think these parents might be disappointed at times? Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that that's what is a reasonable expectation of kids coming into your home, is that they're going to be able to show love back, because they're just being kids that have maybe had experiences that have been scary with adults, and so they're just kind of being their kid self. They're not purposely trying to hurt your feelings, I don't think, or anything like that, but that's probably something to avoid, as far as that's probably a myth. My child shouldn't love or feel loyal to an abusive parent. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about sometimes we just don't understand, like, why does Johnny still want to be connected to this parent that did this really horrible thing? And the reason is because there were some good things there, and kids really want to be connected with their caregivers, even if they didn't make good choices or if they were harmful. And so it doesn't mean that we have to not do what we know how to do to keep kids safe, but it does mean that we have to honor that that's something that is different for them. And it's better just to move on, to forget and not talk about past painful experiences. I don't think that's true. I would say that it doesn't mean you have to force a conversation, right? Like, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this thing, and like, that is not what I am saying. What I am saying is, if a kid brings up a conversation, it's not your job to just like sweep it under the rug and like distract them, right? As far as like, look over there, look, a shiny coin, something, like, let's not talk about this, because that may be teaching a kid that feels safe with you to bring it up, um, that maybe this isn't okay to talk about, right? Like, maybe it isn't safe to bring up. So I think that these are myths that we want to avoid. If we were in a group, I would have you guys pull out your My Child worksheets. You would put the child that's either in your home or the one that you want to focus on through the whole 8 weeks. Like, this is going to be the kid you're focused on. Like, one that we had even maybe before placed with us that was just so confusing. I want that to be my kid. And you're going to fill in some basic information about them, write what you know about their life before they came into your home, and any notes about what you want to understand better. And then we might do a square breathing exercise as a way of kind of calming down before we wrap up. Then we would probably do some big ideas about, like, what are the 3 big ideas from tonight that you want to make sure that we bring forward next week, that we can kind of really be thinking about this week. And that would be maybe the end of a group, though we would spend about, again, 2 hours each night going through that. So I want to pause here. We've got about a good 15-ish minutes or so to pause, see if folks have questions. And Joanne, I see that you're unmuted, so I'll let you kind of lead the charge for how you might like to go.
Well, what I'd like to do, Trip, is mention that several people were asking about how, where can I sign up? And I tried to put the evaluation link in the chat,
Mhm.
but someone said they clicked on it and it didn't come up. Do you happen to have a place where they could sign up
Well,
for
I
the?
think what we are going to do is we could do a couple different ways, Joanne. If the link's not working, another option would be for people to email me at the address that you see here. That would be another option. There, what I'm planning on doing is connecting with the folks that we're training right now
Uh-huh.
to do groups, to facilitate groups, and probably what would be helpful is if you let me know what county you're in. If any of our people have rules by their agency that they can only train people that are in certain counties, I want to make sure to match you up with them. And if there are people who can see anybody, like it doesn't matter what county they're in, then I want to maybe know that too, so that folks that might not live in the county where we have folks represented, that they can kind of do that. And then we also have a roster of people who've been trained before, and there are different dates, Karen. So most of our folks are going to be going to end their group by the end of June, the ones that we're training right now. So that would mean like May would be the latest start for them. Um, Probably more like sometime in mid-April for some of them starting. And they're different times. A lot of times we encourage folks to do like the evening hours so that folks can kind of do that. So just if you're going to send me information, go ahead and send it to my email address. I see people putting it in. Corey, I want to make sure to get you, um, and that way I'll have a way to contact you with your email if we are able to match you up with a facilitator. Okay. Um, so yeah, and I'm sorry the link isn't working, but you can totally send me an email, and then we'll just connect you that way.
So the other thing, Trip, is how could people that Wendy, the email is right there that Trip has up right now.
I just put it in the chat too, Wendy.
Okay, yeah. Um, are there opportunities for any foster families or resource parents to become trainers in this particular
There are
curriculum?
opportunities. I would say probably the best case scenario would be to go through a group first. I would say go
Okay.
through a group. I think that that's probably the best way is to go through a group first and then talk with your facilitator to say, hey, I'm really into this. I'd be interested in maybe being on the rotation of co-facilitators that help with this. And but I really think because ultimately you're going to need to know the curriculum well anyway to do that. And the best way to do it is to go through as a participant. So I would say they're usually 2-hour sessions, Karen. Typically, like, I don't know, here's an example, like 6 to 8 on Wednesday nights. I'm making it up. But that would be an example of what might happen for 8 weeks. And then we encourage our facilitators to also offer makeups if for some reason that people can't make that particular night. Sometimes they'll offer a makeup like the hour before the next group. So if we go from 6 to 8, maybe we'll meet from 5 to 6 with the parent that missed and get them caught up before the next week. But that really depends on the folks that are offering it.
Okay, we just had a lovely lady who got
Yay, we got the link to work. Yeah,
the link,
use that. Use that, and then we'll be able to go around. Is
and
the
that's
Go
that's
ahead.
also for the certificate, your certificates, and doing the evaluation and giving trips and feedback. Um, one question is the curriculum the same? I'm sorry.
is it something that would be used for kinship parents as well? Is I
Yeah,
think the question
yeah,
that Corey's asking. Yes.
yeah.
So it's really for all resource parents, including kinship providers. So it's not meant to be just for foster or adoptive parents. The way it's written, it's meant for all those groups. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Does anyone else have any other questions for Trip?
Yeah, I'm curious
Yeah,
about what you guys think.
definitely. If you're interested in asking a question, just unmute yourself, and we'll be happy to.
Good. Allie and Sam are saying that they really wanted a group maybe like this before. And we encourage our facilitators if they can swing it to like offer ongoing support for folks who've completed groups, because there's a companion curriculum that's been developed called It's Not About You. Like it's all in the same kind of vein of what RPC does. And it's built on a monthly kind of model for people that are in foster parent associations or in kind of groups already. So so this would be a start, and then if counties offer something ongoing after that, I think it could be helpful. And thanks for those of you that are helping problem solve about the link, about like typing it in and getting it to work or those kind of things. So,
Yeah,
and
the best thing, from what I'm hearing, the best thing is to type it in, and that will bring it up. If not, I'm going to put my there's Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. And I've heard really good things about this curriculum. What were some of the things that stood out to you as something that you thought would be helpful to you? Would anybody like to comment on that?
you mean from tonight?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just curious what people were thinking about. What did they think would be most helpful to them?
Maybe people are thinking, oh, Jacqueline came off mute
Yes,
maybe.
I really did not have any question, really any preconceived notions of when I came in, but I just realized that there are other things out there for parents, and that is nice to know that there is something else beyond that is out there that's available.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, there's a lot of supports out there, and I'm glad that this could be another one to try out and see how it fits.
And a lot of people are saying, Trip, that just realizing there are other people out there
Hmm.
that are not alone and that they're going through the same things is a
Hmm.
lot. And
Hmm.
I think it's really interesting when you brought up, Trip, that when you might say it, the foster families or resource families might not hear it the same way they hear it from your co-trainer who
Hmm.
has lived experience. And that actually shows shows in the research too, that
Yeah.
families tend to listen or get information more from other families. So now you're kind of in that double role, Trip.
Well,
That
yeah, and we try to make sure that folks that are in the staff facilitator role know that when they're in that role, they wear that hat,
right.
and try not to
You're in
play
that,
both,
yeah,
because it can get confusing for the group and for the
right,
facilitator. But yes, I think that having both perspectives is really important, because um, I think that resource parents have a way of kind of relating. Okay, here's why this information was important to me. Here's what I
right.
apply. Here's how I applied it, or here's an example of applying this strategy in a way that worked for us, um, as well. So Karen saying local foster parent group meetings went upside down. At least this is a way to have group sessions with folks who know what we're feeling. Good.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that I'm glad to see that lived experience cannot be replaced. Both perspectives are necessary. Right. So I think that and the hope is that the folks that are working together to present this together have really thought about we talk a lot about is make sure that your examples actually highlight the curriculum, right? Versus, I don't know about you guys, but I love telling stories. I love talking about I love funny ones, mostly embarrassing ones are like my best ones. And so, but sometimes I can get caught up in the story, and then I'm like, I wonder, what I was trying to say here. I wonder why I told that story right now. And so we're trying to kind of minimize that, and really make sure that if people are saying, let me tell you this much about this story, because I think it'll help you understand re-experiencing symptoms, or let me tell you this much of the story about why it's important to listen when kids want to talk about trauma and you feel uncomfortable, or those kinds of things. So I think that can be helpful. Wendy,
And
yay, I'm glad you got in. That's great.
I feel really good about the fact that you're modeling the partnership too, because I really do feel like resource parents and have a role that's really important, and so do the agency staff
Yes.
in terms of navigating systems, and that's a really important part of figuring out that support. So I love the topic areas. I think they look really, really good. And I love how you use the strategies for that child.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's really powerful, because I think that's why people want training, so that they can have those practical strategies.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. I'm glad it could be something that folks think might be a good fit for them, or um, might be appropriate. Let's see. Phoebe has a question about the actual form. I'm not sure, Phoebe, because I didn't set up the form. Do you guys know?
I'm not sure about that. You, I would try clicking on it, clicking on the
So Allie and Sam, I think you can unmute now if you'd like.
click on the circle.
I
See
did.
if it
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
I think it's interesting that you're from Duke, and the work that Duke is doing. Just recently, we have 3 adopted teens that we adopted at an older age, and we have been going through attachment trauma, and for each one of them. But someone from Duke contacted us through, they're doing some work for Cardinal, which is I get confused with the kids have Medicare or Medicaid.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. So they did they did a long survey with me, and they're doing it with adoptive parents, because they're trying to help. And again, is it Medicaid, Sam? Medicaid, and Cardinal help them have better trauma solutions. Because I'm telling you, with the last child that we have, if it wasn't for all of the benefits that came through Medicaid, we would have drowned.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So are you with, what is it that Duke does in terms of with child trauma?
So Duke has a number of centers that this is what they focus on. So the Center for Child and Family Health is a private nonprofit that's in a community setting that works with families who have Medicaid, and provides evidence-based treatments for kids who've experienced trauma, and then also trains mental health clinicians, child welfare, juvenile justice across the state in practices that we know work for child trauma as well. So the center I work for is kind of like where Duke meets community nonprofit, if that makes sense. And we've been doing this work for a long time, but I think it's not everybody knows about it. So I'm glad that this could be maybe a good intersection. I also see. No, go ahead.
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes left, and I think it would be very good to end on our let us comment there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So the question that I see is about how trauma often gets misdiagnosed, and why it's also important to learn about trauma and advocate for kids. There's a lot of overlap as far as like if kids are triggered in a classroom, they may look distracted, right? And so sometimes the way the symptoms present, depending on the context or like how they're presenting or when they're presenting, it may not be super clear that a kid's like having a hard time paying attention because of ADHD. It may be because they're thinking about something bad that happened that they're triggered by. So that's my quick version, knowing that we're almost out of time. But I think that's so Ryan's put in the chat to try this link if you are still having problems, and to copy and paste it, though I'm not sure. Maybe Zoom will let you do that. And then the next date is April 15th at 7 p.m. to come back together. So Joanne, I'll let you close us out. I'll stop sharing so people can kind of see each other.
Okay. If all of you could come on your cameras just for a minute, it would be really nice to see your beautiful faces as much as possible. And we can do the Zoom wave to thank Trip for his wonderful presentation. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Trip, we're looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
And really buoy up our foster families, who are the major heroes and heroines out there. So take care, everybody, and know that we're here for you if you have any questions. Thank
Okay.
you, Trip, once
Sure.
again.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Night.